called meeting of the Audit Committee of Del Mar College District Board of Regents is convening at this time. It's now September the 26th, 2024, and we're at the Center for Economic Development. Call the meeting to order. We need a quorum call. Member Carl Crew.
Here.
Chair.
Here.
Of the board. Carol Scott, and I'm Chair of the Audit Committee, Rudy Garza. At this time, I'm going to call for a moment of silence, please. Okay, we do have a quorum present. At this time, we'll give the Pledge of Allegiance. Carl, would you lead us, please?
Please join me in the pledge to our flag. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we're going to recite the Del Mar College vision statement. Del Mar College empowers our communities to achieve their dreams. Okay, Del Mar College is streaming live audio and video from the Audit Committee's Board of Regents and the college's website in real time, with the exception of portions of the meeting considered as closed session by statute. At this time, we're going to call for general public comments. If there's anybody in the audience that would like to address the Audit Committee, you can do that at this time. Okay, no one signed up and nobody's present. Okay, at this time, I'm going to call on Tammy McDonald to help us. I apologize. We're supposed to approve the minutes first, okay? So I overlooked that.
I'll make a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we've got Tammy. Would you go ahead and take the floor now at this time?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Today we have Dan Graves and Brandon Tanos with Weaver, and they are here to discuss the audit work that has happened in the last several months. They will be going over an advisory project on college-wide reporting, advisory over emergency operations planning, safety and security advisory. Dr. Escamilla and his VP cabinet went with Weaver, and we did a refresh of our college-wide risk assessment. They'll review that, and also a proposed FY25 internal audit plan, and then the annual internal audit report, which will close out FY24 that we have to file with the state auditor's office. They'll review that too, and then there will be they'll give us a presentation. There will be a couple of items that we will take into closed session because of the safety and security nature. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dan. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure. With me, I've got Brandon Tanis. Brandon is one of our other partners who led our one of the audit reports here. And so, as Tammy said, these are the topics that we'll be going over: the college-wide data reporting, emergency operations planning, safety and security advisory reports, as well as our risk assessment, fiscal year 25 audit plan, and our 24 annual audit report. I'm going to turn it over to Brandon to go over the college-wide reporting, but Chair Garza, if it's okay with you, I'd like to go through the entire presentation, and then for the safety, security, and the emergency operation plan advisory reports, we can cover all the detail of our recommendations in closed session then, as Tammy mentioned, for the safety, security. So just to go through everything, then go into closed session, and then come back out for any kind of motions. Is that all right?
That'd be perfect.
All right, thanks. So I'm going to let Brandon cover the college-wide reporting then.
Well, thank you all. Good afternoon. So I get the pleasure to talk about a consultative engagement that we worked with Tammy and the rest of the college on that I thought was really important. And through our discussions with definitely Tammy and management was with all the kind of what's going on with HB8 and the different types of reports that we're in charge of, was really getting a good pulse on what are all the different reports that we do here at the college, and really where those kind of risk or liabilities lie that we need to make sure we're complying as a college with all those various things. And so the college currently didn't have that process in place, so we talked about the options and what we could do to help you all. And so we did this consultative engagement really with the end goal of building out a matrix that can really be owned by the college. So I'm going to kind of briefly talk about that process. Happy to answer any questions. So this advisory consultation really was taking an inventory of the people and the processes, the data, and all the technology we have that are required to really prepare key reports that are college-wide, institutional. And there's a lot of reports we do internally. These are more of what comes to you all as part of the board or to external parties. And so those were our kind of primary focus to really kind of say what is the governance and structure and also what could help us with HB8 as we look to comply with that. And so our two main procedures we did was spending a lot of time talking to individuals throughout the college, doing interviews and surveys to kind of see really what are the reports you're responsible for? What are all the data elements that we collect? And how do we make sure that we're having these prepared and reviewed and submitted to really kind of build a centralized matrix? Again, the people, who's in charge of the preparer, reviewers, the backups that are there, also where the data lives, the systems we use, the deadlines and milestones, and if there's any sensitivity of those reports that we need to be aware of. And from there, we built out a college-wide matrix. And so this details those key elements that I just mentioned. And from there, we actually were able to hand that over to management to own. And so, again, we surveyed and interviewed about 25 separate just individuals and departments to collect that information. Again, it was a very collaborative consulting engagement to really make sure we just had that full population of reports. And so overall, we had over about 117 separate reports that are really either go to the board or external parties that we do as a college. A lot of those are state required, or if they're federal with financial aid and so forth. And we put that together and worked and collaborated to handing that over to management, who is going to take over that responsibility and have a centralized management and monitoring and tracking. So there's those parties we interviewed and talked to are still going to be in charge of those reports, but we are going to have a centralized team that's going to make sure that those continue to happen and that we just have a good pulse on those reports. And so that was the engagement that we performed. Again, those deliverables is, I know we provided a memo report of those procedures, but really the main part of that work was this matrix that management now can take and use to help with everyday governance over our college-wide reporting. Any questions?
I don't have a question as much as a comment. 117 college-wide reports, most of which are some sort of compliance or data reporting that is required at the state or federal level, or SACS level. I think that is significant when you think about we are a primarily locally funded organization or educational institution. But that is significant oversight and significant data and compliance reporting. And I just think it's kind of one of those factoids or data points that we all are sticking our back pockets somewhere when folks go, well, higher education is running amok. No, it's not running amok. We have.
And I think it's interesting when you start this process and you say, well, how many reports do you think you have? And I hear like 30, 40. And then when you create this matrix and say, no, there's 117 things that we have to do as a college for reporting. Some are voluntary, some are not voluntary, but things that we have to do. And that's a lot of administrative support to do those things. It takes you out of other duties and tasks at the college. So it's important to keep those kind of things in mind, and happy that we were able to work with Tammy and the rest of the college here to put that in something that everybody can kind of look and understand and quickly be able to help manage and track those of all of our responsibilities.
Yeah, kind of a follow-up on that, was there any findings that we were delinquent in reporting and so on?
We didn't find any of those kind of like findings for delinquents or something we weren't doing. We talked to management more about college expectations and some consistencies, making sure that we have separate preparers and reviewers, or who really is our backup. So there's a lot of people that have institutional knowledge that may be doing reports for a long time, and they may be a backup if they're out, on vacation, but really like if something happened to that person, do we have a trained person to take those over? So more about administrative type areas that for consideration by management, but no findings of critical areas not being covered by the college. All right. Any other questions?
I've got one. 117 does sound like a big burden to carry for any entity, any institution. And I'm just wondering, again, I'm comfortable that we're doing all the things that we're supposed to be doing, because I know that when we got into the HERFA funds, we were able to report, didn't get in any trouble, nobody got sent to jail. So all those things are great, and staff or our folks seem to be able to handle the reports necessary for HERFA, the HERFA funds, HERF funds that we had, right? I'm going to say in the normal course, although we were in an abnormal situation with the pandemic, it's still, they were able to handle it in relatively good order. Mm-hmm. So just wondering if along all those reports, if there's anything in the reporting that we have that might be, I'm going to say antiquated, things that may not be longer necessary. Can some of those reports, any of those reports be, I'm going to say, done away with, sunsetted, as our Dr. Escamilla said, or are there some that are way redundant? There may have been one law or one requirement piled on top of another.
So, and I'll turn it over to Tammy, because our focus was probably on what do we have to do right now. We didn't take the assessment of should we be doing those. I think that's some management question can help answer that.
The large majority of the reports on this matrix are things that we are required to do to comply. And that's all across the college and all different functions. So some of them we do because we're good partners. For example, we participate in a couple of, I'm going to say surveys or certain things through some of the associations that you are members of. And it's just because we are good partners, and it is part of our strategic plan and our vision of education. But for the most part, I don't think that we do anything that is totally voluntary. And I think this process it will help us, because like I said, we've got the master list passed off, and Jessica and I are going to be the stewards of it right now to get the master list and then segment it between the different divisions to say, okay, we're going to be the keeper of the master list, but Augie, your office is responsible. Here's the ones you're responsible for. Tammy, here's the ones you're responsible for. Or here's the ones you facilitate in student services. So we're going to segment those, and then they need to take them and say, okay, this is where we're getting our information. Is there a better way and more efficient way to get the information? Because I think once you put it on paper and you've had these discussions, it also prompts a little bit more thinking of, well, maybe that is the data, but maybe that's not the best way to get the data. Or is there a better way to put the data in so we can get it out a little more efficiently for all these reports that we have to do? So I see this as the beginning of identifying some possible efficiencies as we move forward with collecting our data and how we report it out. And I know that Brandon had mentioned it, and we haven't gotten into the details. Like I said, we're just getting it passed off. There are some, and I know they're working with some other clients on some of the new reporting requirements under HB8. So I think that gives us a good start on those requirements that we're going to be having is the reporting requirements under HB8.
The concern I have is just related to I know we've got all these exercises that we take in order to be able to keep accreditation. Every 10 years, 5 years?
This was not
above.
accreditation. So let me just put this in perspective. These are more regulatory, as far as like coordinating board, the governor's office, the legislative budget board.
LBB, that's right.
Those types, this is not the requirements under accreditation. That's another whole separate project we haven't gotten into, and those live in those different departments that are accredited. So this is just a fraction of our requirements of reporting.
That's the concern that I have, is that we have the requirements we have related to accreditation. We have these requirements we have related to funding sources, and then we've requirements we have related to, say, for instance, the money that we get from the federal government for economic disadvantaged students or grants and
Title V.
yeah, all those things. So just the cumulative effect of all the things that we have to do and gotten to such a point that is there any committee, I'm just going to look a little bit broader than Delmar College, is there any committee in the Community College Association that we have that might be looking at, I'm going to say, trimming down or reshaping the requirements of community colleges, either in the state or federal level?
I wouldn't know how to really answer that other than to say that the things that we take on are mostly, as we're talking about today, are just the governmental types. Individual accreditation, programmatic accreditation, as well as regional accreditation of the entire college. Those are just different balls of wax. We just keep a lot of plates spinning. Mr. Garcia, were you going to say something?
Yeah, so there's different types of reporting, and so I put them in these categories. Number one is a compliance reporting. Number two is operational piece of it. Really, those are the main two that I can think of. And when I think about compliance, it's all those things that are regulated by external agencies that they tell us what is it that we have to do in order for us to continue to receive funding. So they mentioned a few agencies, the coordinating board, then there's our grants like the U.S. Department of Education. They have certain standards and I got to report it by a certain period of time. It could be quarterly, it could be annually, it could vary. In terms of inefficiencies, I don't believe there's any inefficiencies in the compliance piece. I think that was their main focus is on the compliance piece of the reporting. And the added value that I saw out of this body of work was to help us centralize and track those reports that are required of us. That keeps us out of trouble. And so we now have Tammy's area that's going to help us manage that, make sure that if there's any turnover or a transition in individuals, that there is someone that's going to be an oversight to make sure that we're turning in those required reports on a timely basis. That is, we have to do that. From an operational perspective, in my opinion, what little I've seen, I don't see any redundancy. I think, if anything, we continue to evolve. I think the main focus today in our operational reporting is all on HB8 right now. We're rethinking those reports that are going to help us monitor and drive our revenue dollars. And so we're in transition. And so what does that mean? I think once we have a clear picture of the final rules, that we are going to do away with some own reporting and then focus our attention on the new or revised or updated type of operational reporting. So I hope that helps.
Right. And I think you'll see for this coming board meeting, some of the regular topics, not for the audit topics, I think you'll see some good examples of the things we're required to file and submit reports. It's either a full report, or it's a certification where Dr. Escamilla has to sign, or in some cases, the chair, Scott, had to sign a certification saying we're complying. So we have several of those were added this last year in the past legislative session. So we had some new ones that we put on the list, and of course, along with the HB8 ones that were identified. So a lot of it is mandated through some type of legislation or, of course, education code. I mean, there's all sorts of codes that say you will do this.
I'm real comfortable where we are. In the short time I've been at Del Mar, I'm real comfortable that we're reporting and that we're getting high marks for what we're doing, that we're transparent, we're doing all the things we're supposed to be doing. And I'm real comfortable with Mr. Garcia's comment related to looking at the requirements for HB8 and seeing if there's already some reports that we're getting, or data we're getting, so that we can submit that. And so it's dovetailing well. Again, thank you for your work, and I do think that we're doing a good job. I just want to make sure that we don't overburden staff.
Of course.
In what we're asking them to do. So again, thank you.
100% agree with that. So thank you all so much for that, and I'll turn it back over to Dan.
So our next advisory report our advisory audit that we performed was over emergency operations and developing divisional and departmental EOPs. So underneath the college has a college-wide emergency operations plan, and in that emergency operations plan, it talks about each division and department having an EOP to fit underneath the college-wide. So the college comes up with an emergency happens, the college comes up with a plan, deploys it, and then each department who need to can then enact their operations plan. So those division and departmental operations plans needed to be developed, and the scope of this advisory consultation was to help the college and help EH&S personnel develop and refine data tools to gather that information to then help those divisions and departments flesh out and have a well-documented emergency operations plan that covers all the areas that they need to cover based on specific needs of each department. So your English department's going to have something totally different than some of the other professional trades, your welding, your emergency response that have, flammable materials that the English department doesn't have. So you've got different considerations, and so we worked with them to develop that. We provided several recommendations, helped develop some tools, and we can discuss some of those specific recommendations in the closed session. But that's the general procedure and results from that advisory consultation. The next one is over safety and security, and so there was a advisory audit focused on safety and security. The key functions, we looked at compliance reporting, the police department, emergency management and incident response. And again, we did a lot of interviews, a lot of reviewing of documentation, existing policies, procedures, everything that was sort of in current and where should we be going with it. And we provided several recommendations and some reporting matrices as well for elements inside those policies and procedures and inside the documentation that needed to be looked at and addressed, and we provided that over to management. And we can then, again, talk about all those in detail in closed session. The last couple of things that we did for our internal audit plan for fiscal year 2024, in August, we performed a risk assessment refresh. And so about once every 3 years, we come up with a multi-year audit plan. We have completed the third year of our 3-year audit plan that we had presented previously. So it's time to do a very holistic, deep dive refresh of the risk assessment. We do a refresh every year, but it's a little bit higher level. We sat down with all of Dr. Escamilla's cabinet and went and spent, I think, probably 3.5-4 hours of a deep dive into all the areas, talking about risks, talking about the risks that majorly influence the college and then how they affect each of our significant areas. The results of that informed and provided us the information to develop our fiscal year 2025 internal audit plan. And for your perusal here, I know it says top 25 and there's 27 on there. It's because the last 3 have the same score. So I couldn't just cut off right at 25, but these are the top 25 risk areas. This is based on an inherent risk rating. So don't be concerned when you see red and the gold color for high and medium that, oh my gosh, the world's on fire. This is if there were no controls and no policies or procedures in place to protect the college, this is what our risk exposure would be. We do that so that we base it on this is our natural risk. Then we put policies, procedures, and internal controls in place. Internal audit validates the performance and design of those to come up with what a residual risk is. We do not have a residual risk score in the risk assessment, but this is just to help us build the plan. So don't be alarmed when you see more red and gold than green, because this is not a residual risk taking into account all the things we do to protect the college. So this is the adjusted plan, the adjusted risk assessment for the 25 update. At the top, you'll see a lot of information technology. That shouldn't be a surprise. It's always at the top. And a lot of bigger things like grants management, maintenance, construction, payroll, a lot of where the cash inflows and outflows are there, as well as then trickling down through financial aid and some other key pieces that are very driven towards the college mission. There are, again, I think there was 42 different process areas. These are just the top 25. Based on this, we developed our recommended plan for fiscal year 25. We looked at history of internal audits performed, what has been performed in the past and when it was performed, and then what hasn't had an audit performed. And so you'll see the 3 audits that we have recommended here are one over maintenance. So that's going to include the college's maintenance process as well as managing deferred maintenance, which is a big issue amongst all higher education institutions. Senate Bill 17 compliance, that is underneath the executive office realm because that's a college-wide impact. And so as many people are aware of, Senate Bill 17 has come into effect. The state auditor's office actually sent out an inquiry to all higher education institutions asking, are you as an institution performing your own audit on compliance through your internal audit function? Yes or no? I stand to reason that those that are not are then maybe put on a list by the SAO. I don't know 100% if the SAO is going to come audit all of those, but I think that is helping them build a list for them to make a plan to do so. I know the colleges and all the institutions have to file a statement of compliance with the state auditor's office. That's been done. But we are actually performing this audit at other higher education institutions currently and in our fiscal year 25 plans for them. So this is not a surprise to us that the college has elected for internal audit to perform the audit over that versus, report to the SAO that we're not planning on it and then possibly having the SAO come in and audit. But that is why Senate Bill 17 is on the risk assessment, on the audit plan, and it falls underneath the executive office function in the risk assessment. And then also financial aid is the last one for this year. Financial aid is one that we've performed previously, but it's been 4 or 5 years since we've done a full look at financial aid. We probably won't look from a scope perspective, look at end to end from application to award, but there'll be specific pieces that we know are higher risk inside that financial aid process that we'll do some pretty detailed testing on that are pretty important. So things like the return of Title IV calculation, also looking at the common application, the FAFSA, and some of the processes of where we have to come in and do some validation. Those pieces, some things that have changed with the recent FAFSA form, we'll take a look at some of those key risk areas inside there. We also have planned follow-ups for those audits that we've done, including AP disbursements, and I believe that includes P cards from the last audit. And then some follow-ups for other outstanding items like the bursar's office and IT. Any questions on the plan before I move on?
I have a question about the maintenance plan. What does your scope look like on how you audit the college's maintenance plan? How do you do that?
We look at, you can go a lot of different ways. That's a huge area. And so we do have to do some planning. We do some process level risk assessment areas to come up with what is key for the college. I know what we have done in the past for other institutions that look at how does the college develop its list of maintenance. We tie in several factors such as depreciation, and we look at depreciation and planned depreciation for the college that informs us of when we might need to do maintenance, and look at how a plan is developed of what we're going to maintain, how much we're going to budget for it, how we've come up with those estimates, and how we execute that, and monitoring the performance of, because maintenance never goes as planned, right? So you'll have a list of maybe 20 items that you want to make sure are in the maintenance plan for this year, and you might get to 15 of them, but you might have 5 others that got added that you didn't plan on that you had to do. So you have preventative, and then you have responsive maintenance. And so it's a combination of how you develop that. And then for those items that you don't get to, you end up deferring. how do you monitor the deferred maintenance and then decide, for things that we've deferred, when to escalate and perform that? And again, it's a balancing act from a resource constraint of time, money, and personnel of how you do that. And so it's a process that we look at, or we have looked at before. And so it'll be really defining what's important for Del Mar in those areas to come up with exactly what we're going to look at from a process, procedure, and execution standpoint.
I have a couple more follow-up questions. This might be one of those areas where that might be helpful for the board to have a discussion about this as you're developing that project scope, because this has been a topic at the board table on how we are planning, deferring funding, all the things you just talked
Right.
about. And are there policies related to how we approach maintenance that the board ought to take a look at? And then what are the budgetary and resource parameters in which the college president operates in terms of overseeing the maintenance of our physical plant? So I think there's probably some board discussion around that before you just dive in on what you think. That's one of those places where I think the board's going to have a desire to have some understanding of what you're doing, so when you come back, you will have answered the questions that some of the board members might have.
I think also, as part of my evaluation this year, the facilities master plan is one of the ones we've already incorporated into my draft. Stay tuned, soon to come. I'll be sending it out to you all very soon. So as a subset of the master plan, facilities master plan for the college, John's already working on that. And putting the pieces and the parts that he has together, I see this very clearly as a facet of that process. If you're nodding yes, I think we'll meet about that and tie it all together so that we can, because we are preparing on that level to bring that to you also. Absolutely.
These two actions don't need to be operating in silos. They
Exactly.
need to be informing each
Exactly.
other, because we've got limited resources. We don't need multiple folks out here talking about the same topic.
Anything in this area, communication and insight and clarity is key. So I agree.
Well, I think, in my experience, one of the things is so that the preventive side doesn't get to the reactive side is doing some life cycle. I mean, maybe that's not your job, but part of the program ought to be developing some life cycle of certain elements. I mean, in this area, an air conditioner lasts about 10 years. And so you put those on a list and you can plan to have those replaced, whether they need to be or not. At least you got the money. And same way with roofs and other elements. You can say, okay, this is going to last this much time, so I need to start thinking about that rather than waiting until something happens and then you've got to go fix it.
Right, that's where I was talking about tying into the depreciation. Depreciation's just the accounting term for.
You have an accounting term, I have an engineering term.
Yeah, the estimated useful life.
Yeah.
You allocate the cost over the estimated useful life of an asset, and so looking at depreciation helps you determine when you should be looking at. Also, from an engineering and construction perspective, when we go through commissioning, when we commission new systems, the commissioning agent usually has some maintenance planning as part of that commissioning report. And so how does the college tie in what is recommended by the commissioning agent into the maintenance and useful life schedule for specifically key assets like air conditioners and elevators and major HVAC systems, stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot of tie-ins to get to how do we develop the plan.
We'll be sure to tie in on Mr. Strybos, and all of this is very timely, so.
So the last thing on our plan before we go into our closed session for the detailed security reports is our annual internal audit report. As Tammy said, this is our annual report that we prepare. It's prepared according to the guidelines issued by the State Auditor's Office. There on the screen for you are the bullet points that are the 7 major sections. There's several compliance statements. So the first one, compliance with the government code. We present also the plan for '24 and the results of that plan. We disclose any consulting and non-audit services, so the 3 reports that we just have talked about, the college-wide reporting, the emergency operations planning, and the safety security, those are all advisory reports, so those get reported under the consulting services. Our quality assurance review, so that's our peer review letter. As being a CPA firm in Texas, we're subject to a peer review, so that's our latest peer review report. Also, the internal audit plan for fiscal year 2025 that we just discussed. We disclose who's the external auditor for the college, and then we have a disclosure on how the college handles fraud, waste, and abuse reports. And so that's all required by the state auditor's office, and we filled it out in accordance with the latest guidelines that were published in early August. Any questions on that? At this time, I'm ready to move into executive session so that we can talk about the detailed reports for the 2 EOP and safety and security.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the report. At this time, we're going to be going into closed session. So according to, let's say real quick, Texas Government Code 551.071, consultation with legal counsel, and Texas Government Code 551.076, deliberation regarding security devices or audits. So we'll recess the regular meeting and we'll go into closed session. The time is 3:05. Okay. Okay, it's 3:50 p.m. We've concluded our closed session portion of the meeting. I'm now calling the regular meeting back to order. And do we have a motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve the internal audit activity, or the college-wide reporting advisory, the emergency operations planning advisory, the safety and security advisory, the risk assessment refresh, and the FY25 audit plan, and the annual internal audit report.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Did that cover everything?
Is there any public comment related to this motion? Not? You did cover it. We'll be forwarding it to the board for approval at our October 8th meeting. And so with that, I think we conclude this meeting. We are adjourned. Thank you.